Hi, my name is Joey. Wiley Joseph Donaldson III. Please like and subscribe. Welcome to Students of Truth. So I'm making this video. Actually, going to talk about a few things. But Christ consciousness, faith, and particle physics. So and how they all coincide. Check this out. And the power of faith and like unconditional love, Christ consciousness. So check this out. Okay. Where should I start? Okay, so I did write a couple of things down to kind of keeping track. So anything is possible. Anything is possible, right? So we've heard that. You hear people say that, and it's like, I remember when I was growing up, I'd hear people say, even my mom used to tell me, anything is possible. And I used to think when I was a kid, I'd be like, well, it's not possible for me to make $1 million in 1 second, right? And then reason and logic, I was like, well, I guess I would have $999,999. And when I actually got $1 million, that would only take a second. And I rationalized all these things, right? So I didn't understand that anything was possible, but I would like to elaborate now about how it is and how particle physics views that anything is possible, right? So with our technological advances and stuff and particle physics and CERN and all the things that we're discovering about our astronomical, how the microcosmic relates to the macrocosmic, to the cosmos, connect man with God, right? So anything is possible. So Schrodinger's cat, and this was later verified with wave particle duality, the double slit experiment, the observer effect. But so Schrodinger's cat is, the scenario is that you take a cat in a vial of poison and you put it in a sealed box. Okay, and so the question is the cat alive or dead, right? The obvious answer is you do not know until you open the box to see, until you choose to observe it, right? So it proves that the cat exists in superposition, is what it's called. It means that it exists in both states until it's observed, until you choose to open the box and observe it, which solidifies it, puts it in the past. But in the future, right, anything is possible. It's called superposition, right? We don't know if the cat is alive or dead. So therefore, it exists in both states. Okay, it's called superposition. So with CERN and the double slit experiment, right, wave particle duality, and what they discovered is that a photon, which is a single particle of light, can be a particle, a single particle, and a wave at the same time. And the only differentiation, the determining factor, is if it's measured, if it's observed, if it's measured, the instantiation, right, is observing it. So you have two slits, and they shot a single photon, a single particle of light, one at a time, because they wanted to determine the behavior of light. Did it go through the right slit, through the left slit more? Did it have characteristics and stuff like that? And what they irrefutably have proven and discovered is a superposition, that it actually goes through both slits, each slit exclusively, and neither slit at the same time. All possibilities. The only determining factor is if it's measured, when it's observed. Okay, so consciousness, right, and faith and the power of observation. So it was actually Matteo De Stefano on the first season of Initiation. It was the first time I heard somebody say this, but I've had this discussion plenty of times since then. It's an interesting discussion, and goes into unconditional love, which is a really far exceeding concept, right? Conditional. But what Matteo De Stefano said is we're as human beings, right? So while we're solidified in a human body, while we're an individual, right? Um, that we're actually not capable of loving someone else. We are only capable of loving our perception of them. Okay? So our perception is like our perspective, our point of view, our way of looking at things, right? So we're not actually capable of disliking or loving another person, place, or thing. We're only capable of disliking or loving our perception of them. Okay? So say I have a friend, for example, and I like or don't like him, right? It's actually not him that I'm but I only know my perception of him. I only know who he is to me. That's the part that I'm capable of liking, loving, hating, whatever is my perception. And so with alchemy, this is the power to turn obstacles into opportunities, really. And it's understanding that we have the power to change our perception. That's what we have the power as individuals to change, right? The Gnostic philosophy is that consciousness is all that exists. Consciousness has split itself apart to experience itself subjectively. So you can think of consciousness, this living light that animates our anatomical body, right? The spark that gives us life, as like a drop of light from an ocean of light, like a larger source. And so each individual is a equally fractionalized aspect of light, equally fractionalized aspect of source or God or this higher state of consciousness, right? So because we have the power to change our perception as individuals, right? So consciousness is all that exists. Consciousness split itself apart to experience itself subjectively. So, and then the second dimension was created where duality in time and space exist, right? And so, and it actually goes into Gnosticism with like the Pista Sophia and the Archons, Yaldabaoth, that created the material world. Buddhism and the Vedas call it Maya, illusion, the material physical world, right? And in the past, the conversation I've had with people about we're not capable of loving someone else, we're only capable of loving our perception of them. The argument that people propose, and most common argument at least, is that unconditional love, right? So that we are actually spirits having a human experience, which I absolutely agree with. And so in the spirit, that we're not bound by these conditions like we are in this plane. And so in a higher aspect, maybe through meditative practices or whatever, a higher state of consciousness, that we can experience unconditional love, right? Unconditional love. I really love that concept. But so before we were humans, when we were spirit, before we ever had our first human experience, our first human incarnation, right? When we were spirit, we didn't know what it meant to be separated, and we didn't know what death was. So this goes into why do bad things happen? Why does evil exist? If God, omnipotent and all-powerful, created all things, then he also created evil. If he's all-powerful and does not destroy evil on earth with man, that inadvertently would make God evil. Otherwise, he's not all-powerful and doesn't have the authority to defeat evil on the earth with man. So lots of philosophical questions. Why does evil exist? Why do bad things happen to good people and bad people? And so the study of alchemy, right? Our ability to turn obstacles into opportunities. And the way that we do that, so real quick, relativity, right? Einstein proposed relativity, proved special in relativity and special relativity. So prove that time dilation, time is relative to the Earth. That's why we know that, like in the movie Interstellar, you can travel so far off Earth, and this is the twins paradox and the grandfather paradox. Time is relative to the surface of the Earth. The further you go off the Earth, the slower that time moves. In fact, if you move at the speed of light, time stops. Okay? This is particle physics, right, and relativity. So relativity is that it depends on where you're standing, how fast time moves, okay? That's why if you take two twins and send one off into space, traveling at the speed of light, you can come back in 20 years, and the twin that stayed on Earth will have aged 20 years, and the twin that was traveling at the speed of light will not have aged at all. This is time dilation, but it's really relativity that Einstein proved. What relativity is, it depends on where you're standing, right? It's relative to the individual. That's why the Buddhist doctrine of the two truths is that there is relative truth and supreme truth. Because what is true for me may not necessarily be true for someone else. This is relativity. Individual. It depends on where you're standing. It's your perspective. It's your observation. Your perception is what is relative, right? So what good and evil, actually, good and bad, are relative. What you see as evil, right? Someone else who sees it from a different perspective can see the same object or instance and say that it's not evil. They can even say that it's good. So good and bad are relative to our perception, and we can change our perception. As individuals, this is what we have the power to do. We have the power to change our perception. We have the power to change the way that we see something. We have the power to change our mind, okay? This is man's free will, right? That is, because man has free will, it's not completely free. We're all bound by instinctual obstacles like hunger, right? So you could say man has free will. Well, no, he doesn't, because anything he does is going to be within the bounds of that he can eat, right? So he's bound by that. So it's not necessarily free will. That's the argument. But because, what's the quote? I will be what I will to be. That man can become whatever he wills or wants to be. So free will. This is what gives birth to the ego, right? And like what Rudolf Steiner calls the inner I, the I am presence. We have our physical mineral body, ethereal body, astral body, and then our ego I consciousness, our inner I. Again, we are a living light that animates our anatomical body. And actually what Steiner, what I've been able to discern from the collections of lectures that I have studied, I'm absolutely fascinated with, is that Jesus of Nazareth was a human being, and so what Christ actually was this cosmic force. So we have to think about these hierarchies of spirits, right? And Yahweh and Jehovah and Gnostic and Coptic. You've got Yaldabaoth and Sabaoth, and of course Sophia, and going back into pagan religions when you had to invoke different gods at different temples at different times for different aspects of life. And that's one interpretation of when the New Testament says all may come to the Father through me. So Christ was actually the first time that God was represented on earth in one human being, going back to like Zarathustra and Zoroastrianism in Persia after the Indian epoch, coming from Atlantis, right? In Persia, Zarathustra taught Ahura Mazda, the sun, right? The worship of these celestial objects. And then in Egypt, you have a pantheon of gods, but they have like human bodies with like animal heads and stuff. They're half humans, hybrid humans. And then there's the Greco-Roman epoch where for the first time God was put into man's image. So they had a pantheon of gods, different gods for different things, but Greece and Rome were the first culture to put those gods into the image of a man. They would make statues of these gods, of Mercury's and all the different gods, but they would make statues that looked like human beings. So that was the first time that God was put into man's image. And then Christ came, and it was the first time that God was put into man's image and into one single personality, one single human being. But so what the fifth gospel talks about, among other Rudolf Steiner works, is that so Christ is actually this cosmic force, right? The omnipotent, omnipresent, kind of monotheistic, all-creator head deity, creator of heaven and earth. And so, but there's these cosmic forces, and so the Son being actually a cosmic force of love, is unconditional love, incarnated as a human being for 3 years on earth in the body of Jesus of Nazareth. From the time he was baptized in the Jordan River by John the Baptist to the time of the mystery of Golgotha, the crucifixion, that this cosmic force incarnated in the body of a human being, of Jesus of Nazareth, right? And so it was actually when a God came to be a human, to experience death and atone for human beings, and from that time remain on earth as this unconditional love, an unconditional love, right? J. Krishnamurti talks about conditional. Like, how can I know what love is if, like, it's not conditional to me being a human or me being a astral projection of my ego consciousness and stuff, right? I'm trying not to get carried away, and I always always worried about making these videos for too long because keeping people's attention, right? But so the higher self, this living light consciousness, right? There's some really easy ways that we can identify this aspect of ourself, okay? This is where inspiration comes from. Ideas, imagination, intuition, aesthetics, which is moral obligation, right? Because that's so individual. Because of the evolution of our consciousness and where we're at now in the mycelic age, that we really are developing individuality and intelligent, that we decide what is good and what is evil. That's relative to each individual. We have the power to change the way that we see things. The only reason that suffering exists in the world, I mean, I guess besides physical ailments, Buddha taught the end of suffering, it's attachments and desires and expectations, right? Because we rely on things outside of ourselves to make us happy. And because we're powerless over other people, places, and things outside of ourselves, our happiness or state of well-being is contingent on these objects outside of ourselves. So that's an attachment. Like, I live in the United States, so we haven't really been taught like this stuff, like what attachments are and what consciousness is. So there's a new understanding. And the thing about Schrodinger's cat, right? So is the earth round or flat? You could say, is the cat alive or dead? Well, it actually exists in both states, right? Whatever the relative perspective, our subjective perception of if we believe the earth is round or if we believe the earth is flat, it actually exists in both states, regardless of how we choose to perceive that, right? So we have an individual perspective, and we navigate this. Inside your head and inside your body is subjectivity. Outside of your mind and outside of your body is objective, objectionable reality, objectivity outside of yourself. So we navigate through objectionable reality, this world, and the epistemological outline of the concept of being, the concept before concepts, the absolute ideal in Hegelian and Kantian philosophy. But we navigate through this objectionable reality, okay? And we choose to observe things, right? This is the observation. We choose to observe things. When we observe something, right, our observation forms a relationship to that person, place, or thing in objectivity outside of ourselves, or even an idea. When we observe something, a thought, an idea, a person, a place, or thing, our observation is what forms a relationship to that item or object, okay? So we choose to observe it, and our observation becomes either faith or doubt. Doubt creates anxiety, and faith creates anticipation. But if we can understand that anything is actually possible, right? Superposition, until we choose to observe it, right? And because we believe that we know the things that we do, right? We solidify that. So we have so much faith. I have so much faith in the fact that this is a microphone, right? Like I can see that, right? So I really have faith in that. And technically that's what actually makes it real perceptually, but the Tao teaching is logic and reason create boundaries for our perception. But so I've got to figure out a better way to say this stuff on camera.